I've always believed there are moments that divide a life into before and after. My first teaching job meeting. Richard, the birth of Caroline, and now this moment standing in my kitchen as my daughter coldly informs me that she has mortgaged my home without my knowledge or consent. He needed it more than you do, Mom, Caroline says, not a hint of remorse in her voice as she explains how she used my personal documents to secure a $285,000 loan against my fully paid home. Greg's startup has real potential. You're 68. He's 45 with decades of earning ahead of. I stare at her. This stranger wearing my daughter's face. The Caroline I thought I knew. The little girl who cried when caterpillars died. The teenager who volunteered at the senior center. The woman who promised her father on his wedding day that she would always take care of me has been replaced by someone calculating and cold. For 47 days I had sat beside Richard's hospital bed as cancer slowly claimed him. 47 days of holding his hand, moistening his lips, reading aloud his favorite poetry when pain kept him awake through the night. 47 days when Caroline visited exactly 3 times, always with excuses about the children's activities or Greg's business meetings. And during those 47 days, while I kept vigil over my dying husband of 46 years, my daughter had apparently been busy gathering my financial documents, forging signatures where necessary, and leveraging the home that represented my only real financial security to fund her husband's latest entrepreneurial venture. The payments are $1,750 a month, she continues, as if discussing something as trivial as a cable bill. It's only for a year or two until Greg's company takes off. Then we'll pay it all. My teacher's pension is $2,300 a month. The mortgage payment she's arranged would leave me with $450 to cover utilities, food, insurance, and everything else. Caroline, I say, my voice steadier than I feel. This is my home, my only significant asset. You had no right. Dad would have wanted to invest in family. She interrupts the familiar refrain whenever she wants something. Richard, generous to a fault, had indeed believed in supporting family. But he had also been the one to finally cut off financial support to Caroline and Greg after their third failed business venture depleted our retirement savings by $120,000. Your father would never have approved of mortgaging my home without my knowledge while he was dying. Correct her quietly. Something hardens in Caroline's expression. A glimpse of the stranger she has apparently always been beneath the facade of the daughter I thought I knew. Well, it's done now. The papers are signed. The money's been transferred. Greg's company is already in development. You'll just have to manage the payments until we can take them over. I feel a curious calm settle over me like the eye of a hurricane. For 42 years I have been first and foremost Caroline's mother, prioritizing her needs, making excuses for her shortcomings, believing in her fundamental goodness despite mounting evidence to the contrary. But in this moment, I am suddenly simply Eleanor Bishop again, the woman who existed before motherhood, who had an identity and capabilities entirely separate from her role as nurturer and protector. See, I say, reaching for my purse on the counter. Inside is my wallet, my phone, and the letter from Mutual Life Insurance that had arrived yesterday. Confirmation of the $750,000 policy that Richard and I had maintained in secret, knowing our daughter's financial irresponsibility might one day threaten our security. Caroline mistakes my calm for resignation. "I knew you'd understand," she says, the tension in her shoulders easing. "It's really what's best for everyone. And once Greg's company takes off, we'll be able to take care of you properly." I look around the kitchen where I've prepared thousands of family meals, where Richard and I danced on our 40th anniversary, where Caroline learned to bake cookies and later announced her engagement. Every surface holds memories that are now tainted by this betrayal. "Then don't complain about what happens next," I tell her, my voice soft but clear as I walk toward the door. "What's that supposed to mean?" Caroline calls after me, the first hint of uncertainty creeping into her tone. "Mom, where are you going?" "Don't answer." The front door closes behind me with a quiet click that belies the seismic shift it represents. My sensible Honda, the car Richard insisted on buying new for me 3 years ago, despite Caroline's suggestion that at your age, Mom, a used car makes more sense. I sit for a moment, hands steady on the steering wheel. My phone buzzes with a text from Caroline. "Mom, you're overreacting. Come back so we can discuss this rationally." I silence the phone and start the engine. As I pull away from the house that is now burdened with a mortgage I never approved, I catch a glimpse of Caroline watching from the window. Her expression a mixture of irritation and confusion. She has never seen this version of her mother before. The woman who existed before she became a mother. The woman who is now re-emerging from decades of dormancy. Eleanor Bishop, age 68. Recently widowed, newly betrayed by her only child, drives away from her mortgaged home with no destination in mind but a growing certainty about her next steps. The teacher everyone in Cedar Grove knows for her patience and kindness has left the building. In her place is the woman who once negotiated million-dollar deals in Boston's financial district, who chose to become a teacher, not out of necessity but conviction, and who now has nothing left to lose but her dignity. And she refuses to relinquish that. As the familiar streets of my neighborhood recede in the rearview mirror, I feel something unexpected beneath my grief and shock, a flicker of anticipation. For the first time in decades, I am not constrained by the careful considerations of motherhood or marriage. I am simply a woman with a problem to solve and the suddenly recovered knowledge that I was once very, very good at solving problems. "Then don't complain about what happens next," I had told Caroline, and I meant every word. The harbor in Motel sits at the edge of Cedar Grove. Its faded blue exterior and flickering neon sign a familiar landmark for locals, but rarely a destination. Pay cash for 3 nights, ignoring the clerk's curious glance. A woman my age alone is an unusual sight in this establishment that caters primarily to commercial fishermen and the occasional budget tourist. Room 12 is clean but Spartan. A double bed with a floral comforter that has seen better days. A small table with 2 chairs. A bathroom with towels worn thin from countless washings. It reminds me of the first apartment Richard and I shared after college before success and stability brought us the comfortable home that is no longer truly mine. Set my purse on the bed and take out my phone. 17 missed calls from Caroline. 3 from Greg. A text from my neighbor, Martha. Caroline came by looking for you. Seemed upset. Everything okay? Reply only to Martha, taking some time to myself. Will explain later. Please don't share my business with Caroline. Now. Martha, a widow herself for 5 years, responds immediately. Understood. Here if you need anything. The simple offer of support brings unexpected tears to my eyes. The first I've allowed myself since discovering Caroline's betrayal. I sit on the edge of the bed and finally let the magnitude of the situation wash over me. My husband is gone. My daughter has betrayed me in the most fundamental way. My home is burdened with a debt I never agreed to. At 68, when I should be settling into a secure if modest retirement, I am instead facing financial ruin. Tears don't last long. I've never been one for extended self-pity, a trait Richard always admired. Eleanor Bishop doesn't wallow, he would say proudly. She assesses and addresses, assess and address. The mantra that served me well during my years in finance before I chose to become a teacher. It's time to remember those skills. I open my laptop, the same one I used to grade papers and create lesson plans before retirement, and begin my research. First, the specifics of the mortgage Caroline has taken out on my home. Online banking reveals the full details. $285,000 at 6.8% interest. A 30-year term with a balloon payment due in 5 years. The funds were transferred directly to Green Innovations LLC, the company Greg incorporated 3 months ago, while Richard was still alive but too ill to be aware of financial matters. Next, the legal implications. I may have been out of the financial world for decades, but I still understand fraud when I see it. Caroline forged my signature or misrepresented herself as having authority to act on my behalf. There are clear legal remedies. I compile a list of elder law attorneys in the county, making note of those who specifically mention financial exploitation in their practice areas. Finally, I research Green Innovations LLC. The company website is slick but vague, full of buzzwords about disruptive technology and innovative solutions without specifying exactly what product or service they provide. The O-Team page features Greg prominently as founder and CEO along with 3 young people listed as development associates whom I've never heard mentioned despite Caroline's constant updates on Greg's business ventures. By midnight, my eyes are burning, but my mind is clearer than it's been since Richard's diagnosis 6 months ago. I have a preliminary plan with 3 parallel tracks. Legal. Consult with an attorney about the mortgage's validity and potential remedies. Financial. Secure my remaining assets, including Richard's life insurance payout, before Caroline can access them. Intelligence. Gather information about Green Innovations' actual business prospects to assess the true risk to my home. I close the laptop and prepare for bed. The cheap motel mattress, a poor substitute for the memory foam Richard insisted on buying. When his back started troubling him, as I drift towards sleep, I remember something my father told me when I got my first job in finance. Ella Lehner, in business, information is currency and timing is everything. The person who knows more and moves faster always has the advantage. Tomorrow I will start using my currency and leveraging my timing. Caroline and Greg believe they're dealing with a resigned, compliant widow, too emotionally fragile after her husband's death to mount any significant resistance. Their first mistake was betraying me. Their second and potentially more costly mistake is underestimating me. Morning brings renewed purpose. After a quick shower and a breakfast of vending machine, coffee and packaged muffins, I drive to Coastal Community Bank where Richard and I have had our joint accounts. Marion Jenkins, the branch manager, has known us for 20 years, attending the same church and serving on the library board. With me, Eleanor, she greets me with genuine warmth, tinged with sympathy. Was so sorry to hear about Richard. How are you holding up managing one day at a time? I reply the standard response that satisfies without inviting deeper inquiry. I need to discuss some account changes. Marion is there somewhere. Private, we can talk. In her office with the door closed, I explain the situation, with a factual detachment that surprises even me. Marion's expression shifts from concern to shock to carefully controlled outrage. This is a clear case of financial exploitation, Eleanor, she says when I finish. As a mandated reporter for elder abuse, I should inform you that I'm obligated to report this to Adult Protective Services. I hadn't considered this angle, but it makes perfect sense. I understand and I appreciate that. In the meantime, I need to secure whatever assets remain under my control. Marion nods, fingers already moving efficiently over her keyboard. First, let's review what accounts you have with us and their current status. The next hour is a methodical review of my financial situation. Our main checking account, now mine alone, contains $4,278. A savings account holds another $12,350. A certificate of deposit with $35,000 is scheduled to mature in 3 months. Most significantly, the insurance check for $750,000 that I deposited yesterday is on a standard 5-day hold before the funds become available. I need to ensure Caroline cannot access any of these funds, I explain. She was a signator on the checking account for emergency purposes when Richard and I traveled, but I want that authorization removed immediately. Marion makes the necessary changes, her efficiency a balm to my frayed nerves. The insurance funds will clear by Friday, she confirms. What would you like to do with them once they're available? For now, nothing, I decide. I need legal advice before making any significant financial moves, but I want to ensure they're protected from any attempts to access them. Understood. I've removed Caroline's authorization from all accounts and placed a security flag that will require enhanced verification for any transactions. Marion hesitates, then adds more personally. Eleanor, I've known you and Richard and Caroline for 2 decades. I never would have expected this from her. Neither would I admit. The first crack appearing in my carefully maintained composure. Neither would I. As I leave the bank, my phone rings again. Caroline, for the 23rd time since yesterday. This time I answer. Mom, where are you? Her voice carries more irritation than concern. I've been calling for hours. I'm aware, I reply. My tone neutral. I needed some time to process the fact that my daughter mortgaged my home without my knowledge or consent while I was caring for my dying husband. You're being dramatic, Caroline dismisses. It's a financial arrangement that benefits the family. Greg's company is going to be huge. They're developing an AI application for the healthcare industry that already has potential investors interested. The specific mention of the business catches my attention. The first concrete information about what Green Innovations actually does. I file it away for later. Sir, Caroline, what you did was not only unethical but likely illegal. I say calmly. I'll be consulting with an attorney to determine my options. An attorney. Her voice rises in disbelief. Are you serious? You would sue your own daughter, your only child. I'm simply exploring my legal rights regarding a fraudulent mortgage on my property. Correct her. The fact that the fraud was perpetrated by my daughter is unfortunate but irrelevant to the legal question. Beat of silence then. Would be so disappointed in you right now. The attempt to manipulate me through Richard's memory ignites a flash of anger so intense it momentarily takes my breath away. Don't you dare invoke your father's name to justify what you've done, I say, my voice low and controlled. Richard would be appalled by your actions, and we both know it. I end the call before she can respond, my hands shaking slightly as I place the phone in my purse. The encounter confirms what I need to know. Caroline has no remorse, only indignation that I'm not accepting her actions as reasonable. There will be no appeal to her better nature, no reconciliation. That doesn't involve concrete legal and financial protections for myself. My next stop is the office of Harriet Winters, the elder law attorney whose name topped my research list. Her receptionist informs me she has no openings for 2 weeks, but when I briefly explain my situation, I'm told to wait. 5 minutes later, I'm seated across from Harriet herself, a sharp-eyed woman about my age with a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately puts me at ease. Financial exploitation of seniors is 90% of my practice these days, she explains after hearing my story. Usually it's scammers or caregivers, but family members are increasingly common perpetrators. What makes your case unusual is how quickly you're responding. Most victims don't seek help until the damage is much more extensive. I spent 15 years in corporate finance before becoming a teacher, I explain. I recognize a fraudulent transaction when I see one, even when my own daughter is behind it. Harriet's eyebrows rise slightly. Finance to teaching. That's an interesting career path. I wanted work that aligned better with raising a family, I reply. The irony of sacrificing career advancement for a daughter who would ultimately betray me not lost on either of us. Well, your background serves you well now, Harriet says briskly. Here's our path forward. First, we file for an emergency injunction to prevent any further financial transactions involving your property. Then, we challenged the validity of the mortgage based on fraudulent representation and potential forgery. Simultaneously, we pursue elder abuse charges through Adult Protective Services, which gives us additional legal leverage. The decisive strategy resonates with my own thinking. How long will this process take? That depends on several factors, including how aggressively your daughter and son-in-law fight back, Harriet replies candidly. But my goal would be to have the mortgage invalidated within 3 to 6 months. I sign the retainer agreement without hesitation, authorizing a $5,000 initial payment from my limited funds. As I prepare to leave, Harriet offers one final piece of advice. Eleanor, document everything from this point forward. Every conversation, every text message, every financial document you can access. Information is your most valuable asset right now. I smile at the echo of my father's wisdom from so many years ago. Information is currency. Agree. And I intend to be very, very wealthy in that regard. Returning to my motel room, I set up a proper workspace at the small table by the window. My teacher's organizational skills merge with my long, dormant financial analyst's methodology as I create a systematic approach to gathering and categorizing information. Caroline and Greg believe they're dealing with a heartbroken widow, too overcome by grief to mount an effective defense. They're about to discover just how wrong they are. Evening falls, I receive a text from an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Bishop, this is Kevin Shaw. I worked with Greg on the medical records project until last month. We should talk. Olive. Interested. I stare at the message. Small smile forming. The intelligence gathering phase of my plan may have just received an unexpected boost. I save the number, considering my next move carefully. Caroline and Greg wanted to use my home as capital for their business ambitions. They're about to learn a harsh lesson about the true cost of that decision. I meet Kevin Shaw at a coffee shop in the next town over, far enough from Cedar Grove to avoid casual observation, yet public enough to feel safe meeting a stranger. He's younger than I expected, probably in his late 20s. With an earnest expression and the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who prioritizes intellect over presentation. Thank you for meeting me, Mrs. Bishop, he says, fidgeting with his coffee cup. I wasn't sure you'd respond to my text. I'm curious how you got my number, Mr. Shaw, I reply, maintaining a teacher's calm authority. Despite my own curiosity, he has the grace to look embarrassed. I had access to Green Innovation's contact database before I left. Your information was listed under potential investors. The revelation shouldn't surprise me, but it. Caroline and Greg had apparently been planning to approach me for investment even before they resorted to mortgaging my home without consent. And why exactly did you leave Green Innovations? I ask, getting to the heart of the matter. Kevin glances around before leaning forward. Ethical concerns, Mrs. Bishop. Greg recruited me from medical software development, promising we'd create an AI system to improve patient record security. Once funding became tight, the focus shifted to less ethical applications. Be specific, please. They're developing an algorithm to identify patients likely to benefit from expensive treatments, but with insurance limitations that would prevent full payment to providers. His voice drops further, essentially helping healthcare companies avoid treating patients who would cost them money. The business model's cynicism is breathtaking. And this is what my home was mortgaged to fund. Kevin nods, misery evident in his expression. When I questioned the pivot, Greg let me go. Said I lacked business vision. 3 others left with me. What remains is a skeleton crew of recent graduates too inexperienced to recognize the legal quicksand they're standing in. You have documentation of this transition? I ask my former financial analyst's mind, immediately focused on concrete evidence. Some emails, meeting notes, the original business plan versus current development guidelines. He hesitates. I shouldn't have these materials technically speaking, but I was concerned enough to secure copies before leaving. Would you be willing to share them with my attorney? His response is immediate. That's why I contacted you. When I heard through mutual connections that Greg had somehow secured major funding despite our product issues and that it involved his mother-in-law's property, it didn't feel right to stay silent. We spend the next hour reviewing the materials Kevin has brought on a secure flash drive. The picture that emerges is damning. Green Innovations began with legitimate healthcare technology aspirations, but pivoted toward ethically questionable applications when initial development proved more challenging than anticipated. More concerning, their current approach carries significant legal risks under healthcare discrimination laws, a fact Greg seems to have deliberately concealed from potential investors. This company will never succeed, I conclude. My financial analysis skills rusty but still functional. Even if they complete development, the legal challenges would bankrupt them before they could scale. That's my assessment as well. Kevin agrees, which makes the mortgage situation even more troubling. Money will evaporate with nothing to show for it. As we prepare to leave, Kevin hesitates. Mrs. Bishop, I hope this helps. I'm not typically a whistleblower, but he trails off, searching for words. You have integrity, Mr. Shao. I finish for him, an increasingly rare commodity. Thank you. Back at the Harbor Inn, I secure Kevin's flash drive in my laptop bag and call Harriet Winters to brief her on this new information. Her response is immediate and strategic. This strengthens our case significantly, she confirms. If we can prove Greg knew the business model was fundamentally flawed when securing the mortgage, it adds weight to the fraud allegations. I'll expedite our filing for the emergency injunction. After ending the call, I check my messages. 3 more from Caroline, increasingly demanding, and 1 from Greg that makes my blood boil. Luna. Caroline is upset by your dramatic reaction. The mortgage is a standard business arrangement. If you persist with this attorney nonsense, you'll only waste money you clearly need. Be reasonable. The condescension in his tone. Addressing me by my first name, dismissing my legal rights as nonsense, positioning himself as the voice of reason ignites something beyond anger. It crystallizes my resolve. Don't respond to either of them. Instead, I call Marion at the bank to confirm the insurance funds will be available tomorrow as planned. Then I contact Martha, my neighbor who has been keeping an eye on my house. There's been a lot of activity, Martha reports. Caroline and Greg were there all yesterday evening removing boxes. And today a young man in a business suit was taking photographs of the exterior. Photographs. This is unexpected and concerning. Measuring the yard. Too, like a property assessment. The implications are disturbing. Are they already planning to sell my home? Or perhaps planning renovations to increase its value for a future sale? Either scenario suggests they're moving forward aggressively despite my clear opposition. Martha, would you be willing to keep a log of all visitors and activities you observe at the house? Could be important for my legal case. Already started one, she assures me, the efficient librarian she was before retirement, evident in her approach. Dates, times, descriptions, even a few discreet photos from my garden when they were loading boxes into Greg's car. You're a godsend, I tell her sincerely. Nonsense. What they're doing isn't right, Eleanor. Richard would be furious. The mention of my late husband brings both pain and clarity. Richard was always my moral compass in difficult situations. His integrity unwavering, even when it cost us financially. What would he advise now? The answer comes with perfect clarity. Protect yourself. First, then seek justice, not revenge. The distinction is crucial. With this principle in mind, I review my plan for tomorrow when the insurance funds become available. I need to secure the money, while maintaining maximum flexibility for whatever legal challenges lie ahead. Caroline and Greg have shown they're willing to forge documents and manipulate financial instruments. I cannot underestimate their potential for further deception. My phone buzzes with another text from Caroline. Mom, this silent treatment is childish. Greg and I are trying to create generational wealth for our family, including you. Making this personal. The stunning lack of self-awareness would be almost comical if it weren't so infuriating. Making it personal to object to someone mortgaging your home without consent. The mental gymnastics required for such position are truly Olympian. For a brief moment, I wonder what happened to the daughter I thought I raised. Was she always this person and I simply refused to see it? Or did something change her along the way? Perhaps Greg's influence, or the materialistic values that seem to drive their every decision. The questions have no satisfying answers and ultimately they don't change my current reality. My home is encumbered with a fraudulent mortgage. My daughter and son-in-law see me as a financial resource rather than a person deserving of respect and consideration. And at 68, recently widowed, I am starting over in ways I never imagined. Tomorrow, when the insurance money becomes available, I will begin the process of rebuilding my security, and Caroline and Greg will begin to understand exactly what they've awakened in the mother they so gravely underestimated. Friday morning dawn, clear and bright, a perfect New England autumn day that belies the storm brewing in my personal life. I check out of the harbor in after 4 nights, the longest I've ever stayed in a motel, and drive directly to Coastal Community Bank. Marion greets me with the good news I've been waiting for. The insurance funds are fully available as of this morning, she confirms in the privacy of her office. All $750,000 has cleared and is ready for your instructions. The amount still seems surreal to me. More money than Richard and I ever had at our disposal at one time. We'd purchased the policy 30 years ago when term life insurance was relatively inexpensive, never expecting to need it until we were both much older. Richard's early death at 70 from aggressive pancreatic cancer hadn't been in our careful retirement calculations. I'd like to move $700,000 to a new account at First Atlantic Bank, I tell Marion, having researched my options extensively. The remaining $50,000 should stay here in a new account under my name only. Marion nods, processing my request without question. She understands the strategy. Dividing assets between institutions provides additional security against unauthorized access. First Atlantic has no connection to my existing financial history with Caroline, making it far more difficult for her to attempt any further financial maneuvers against me. I've prepared the wire transfer authorization, she says, sliding the form across her desk. Once you sign, the funds should reach First Atlantic within hours. As I sign the document, I feel a curious mixture of grief and empowerment. The money represents Richard's final act of protection, a safeguard he put in place decades ago, maintained faithfully through years when premiums felt burdensome against our teachers' salaries, all to ensure I would never face financial insecurity in my final years. Richard would be proud of how you're handling this, Marion says softly, as if reading my thoughts. He always said you were the backbone of your family, even when you let him think he was. The observation brings unexpected tears to my eyes. The first I've shed today, though surely not the last. Thank you for saying that, I manage, accepting the tissue she discreetly offers. With the transfer initiated, I move to the next phase of my plan. Harriet has arranged for me to meet with a real estate attorney immediately after my bank appointment. The timing is crucial. I need expert advice before making my next move. Douglas Freeman's office occupies the second floor of a colonial building on Cedar Grove's Main Street. At 75, he's the town's most experienced real estate lawyer, having handled property transactions in the county for nearly 5 decades. Mrs. Bishop, he greets me warmly, rising from behind a desk crowded with documents. Harriet briefed me on your situation. Troubling case. Indeed. I appreciate his directness. I need to understand my options regarding the property itself, Mr. Freeman. Specifically, can I still sell the house despite the fraudulent mortgage? He settles back into his chair, steepling his fingers in consideration. The short answer is yes, but with complications. The mortgage, though fraudulently obtained, has been recorded against the property. Any sale would require either satisfying that lien or getting it invalidated through legal proceedings. And if I wanted to sell immediately, you'd need to either pay off the mortgage from the sale proceeds or place those funds in escrow pending resolution of the fraud case. He studies me carefully. May I ask why you're considering selling rather than simply fighting to invalidate the mortgage? Home has been in your family for decades, as I recall. The question touches on something I've been processing since discovering Caroline's betrayal. The house doesn't feel like home anymore. I admit every room holds memories now tainted by what my daughter did, and practically speaking it's larger than I need as a widow living alone. Douglas nods in understanding. In that case, I would recommend an approach that maintains your flexibility while maximizing financial return. We can list the property while simultaneously pursuing invalidation of the fraudulent mortgage. This creates leverage from multiple directions. And what would potential buyers think about purchasing a property with ongoing legal issues? With proper disclosure and the right price adjustment, it could still be attractive to certain buyers, he explains, particularly if we structure the sale with contingencies related to mortgage resolution. The market in Cedar Grove remains strong, especially for established properties in your neighborhood. We spend the next hour outlining a strategic approach that aligns with Harriet's legal efforts. By the time I leave Douglas's office, I have a clear path forward. I will list my house for sale at a competitive price, use the legitimate interest from potential buyers as leverage against Caroline and Greg, and continue pursuing legal invalidation of the mortgage through Harriet. My next stop is Jenny Sullivan Real Estate, the most reputable agency in town. Jenny herself, a formidable woman in her 50s who has sold more Cedar Grove properties than any other realtor, greets me with professional warmth that shifts to genuine concern when I explain my situation. Ella Lehner, this is absolutely unconscionable, she says, indignation evident in her tone. I've known Caroline since she was in my daughter's Girl Scout troop. I never would have expected this from her. Neither would I acknowledge the simple truth, still painful to admit. But here we are. I'd like to list the house as soon as possible. Jenny's efficiency matches my urgency. Within an hour, we've established a listing price of $475,000, slightly below market value to attract immediate interest, and scheduled a photographer for tomorrow morning. The listing will go live on Monday, giving me the weekend to prepare the house for showing. You'll need to disclose the mortgage situation, Jenny advises, but we can frame it as a legal matter in process of resolution. Given your property's location and condition, I expect significant interest despite the complications. As I leave her office, my phone buzzes with a text from Martha. Greg is at your house now with 3 men in business suits. They're measuring rooms and taking more photos. The information confirms my suspicions. They're already planning the next phase of their scheme, perhaps renovations to increase the property's value for eventual sale after they've fully established control. The audacity is breathtaking. I drive to a small cafe on the outskirts of town, needing a quiet space to think before my next move. Over a cup of tea and a sandwich I barely taste, I review my progress so far. The insurance money is secure and divided between 2 institutions. Legal proceedings to invalidate the mortgage are underway. The house will be listed for sale on Monday. I have documented evidence of Greg's questionable business practices through Kevin Shao, but I still lack a critical piece of information. Exactly how Caroline executed the mortgage fraud. Understanding her methods would strengthen my legal case and potentially protect me from similar attempts in the future. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone rings with a number I don't recognize. Mrs. Bishop, this is Diane Kramer from First Fidelity Mortgage. Calling regarding some irregularities we've discovered in your recent home equity loan application. My heart rate accelerates. I never applied for a home equity loan with First Fidelity. That's precisely the irregularity I'm referring to, she replies, her tone shifting from professional to concerned. Our fraud department flagged the application. During a routine review, the signatures and documentation didn't align with our verification processes. I would very much like to know what documentation was submitted, I tell her, reaching for my notebook. I'm currently pursuing legal action regarding a fraudulent mortgage on my property. In that case, I think we should meet in person, Mrs. Bishop. There's information you should be aware of that I'm not comfortable discussing over the phone. We arranged to meet Monday morning at her office in Portsmouth. As I end the call, a grim satisfaction settles over me. Puzzle pieces are coming together faster than I anticipated. Caroline and Greg apparently attempted to secure multiple loans against my property, not just the one I've discovered. Their greed may prove to be their undoing. Back in my car, I check my phone to find 7 missed calls from Caroline and a text that makes my blood boil. Mom, stop. Whatever you're doing with the insurance money, that's family money meant for all of us, not just you. We need to discuss how it should be properly distributed. The breathtaking entitlement, claiming rights to Richard's insurance policy, that was explicitly designated for my financial security, solidifies my resolve. This isn't just about the house anymore. It's about establishing boundaries that should never have been necessary between a mother and daughter. I start the engine, a clear destination in mind. It's time to see exactly what Caroline and Greg have been doing to my home in my absence. Park a block away from my house. A precaution that feels strange when approaching my own home of 40 years. From Martha's driveway next door, I have a clear view of the activity. Greg's silver BMW in the driveway alongside an unfamiliar van with coastal renovations painted on its side. Through my living room windows I can see movement. Multiple people walking through my house as if they own it. Martha emerges from her side door, garden shears in hand as a convenient prop for our conversation. They've been here since 10 this morning, she reports, in a low voice, pretending to trim her hydrangeas. The renovation crew has been measuring for what sounds like a complete kitchen remodel. I heard Greg telling them to prioritize features that increase resale value. The information confirms my suspicions. They're planning to renovate and then sell my house, likely assuming I'll eventually accept their actions as a fait accompli. The sheer audacity leaves me momentarily speechless. And Carolyn, I ask, wondering if my daughter is participating in this violation. Hasn't been here today. Just Greg and the contractors. Martha hesitates, then adds, Eleanor, I don't think you should confront them alone. Greg seemed agitated when he arrived. I heard him on the phone saying something about securing the asset before she causes more problems. Her concern is valid, but I'm beyond caution now. I appreciate your worry, Martha, but I need to see exactly what they're doing. Would you mind calling me in about 15 minutes? That gives me an excuse to cut the conversation short if needed. Martha agrees reluctantly, extracting a promise that I'll leave immediately if I feel unsafe. With a steadying breath, I walk up the familiar path to my front door. The door Richard insisted on painting red because a home should announce itself with confidence and use my key to enter. The conversation in the kitchen halts abruptly at the sound of the door opening. 4 men turn to stare as I walk into my own home. Greg and 3 strangers in work clothes holding tape measures and notepads. Greg recovers quickly, his surprise morphing into forced joviality. I didn't expect you today. We're just looking at some potential updates to the property. Updates to my property. I correct him calmly, setting my purse on the entry table with deliberate ease. The property you and Caroline fraudulently mortgaged while I was at the hospital with my dying husband. The renovation crew exchanges uncomfortable glances, clearly sensing they've stepped into a family dispute beyond the usual client disagreements. Greg's smile tightens. Gentlemen, would you give us a few minutes? Wait outside and we'll continue shortly. Once they've filed out, Greg's demeanor changes instantly. What the hell do you think you're doing, Eleanor? Caroline is beside herself with your disappearing act, and now I hear you're moving money around and meeting with attorneys. This needs to stop. Immediately. No, Greg. What needs to stop is your assumption that you have any right to make decisions about my home or my finances. I look pointedly around the kitchen where cabinet samples and countertop materials are spread across my table, including renovations I haven't authorized. These improvements will benefit everyone, he argues, his tone shifting to the condescending patience one might use with a difficult child. The updated kitchen will significantly increase the property's value. For whose benefit? Certainly not mine, since you've made it clear you expect me to quietly accept your theft of my home. His expression hardens. It's not theft. It's family asset management. Caroline is your only child, your heir. This house would eventually be hers anyway. That was for me to decide, not for you to take. I maintain a calm exterior despite the fury building inside me. And to be clear, as of this morning, Caroline is no longer my heir in any capacity. This lands like a physical blow. The first indication that he recognizes real consequences may be forthcoming. What are you saying? I'm saying I've updated my will. Saying the insurance money from Richard is secure beyond your reach. And I'm saying this house will be listed for sale on Monday morning. Greg's face flushes with anger. You can't sell the house. A mortgage. A fraudulent mortgage that's currently being investigated by both my attorney and the fraud department at First Fidelity. I interrupt, taking satisfaction in his momentary confusion. At the mention of First Fidelity. Yes, I know about that application too. You've been busy, haven't you? He takes a step toward me, his height suddenly intimidating in the confines of my kitchen. You're making a serious mistake, Eleanor. Caroline and I were trying to help you, providing financial management you clearly need. The vindictive response only proves you're not thinking rationally. The attempt to gaslight me to reframe their exploitation as assistance and my self-protection as irrational ignites something deep and fierce within me. Me be perfectly clear, I say, my voice steady despite my racing heart. What you and Caroline did was fraud. It was elder abuse. It was a betrayal so profound I still struggle to comprehend it. But your biggest mistake wasn't the mortgage, Greg. It was underestimating me. My phone rings. Martha's promised call. I answer without taking my eyes off Greg. Yes, I'm at the house. No, everything's fine. Yes, I'll be there shortly. I end the call and retrieve my purse. The contractors can leave. There will be no renovations. A real estate photographer will be here tomorrow morning to prepare the listing. Caroline won't accept this, Greg warns, his tone now openly threatening. And neither will I. We have documentation showing your approval of these financial arrangements. Your word against ours. Who do you think people will believe? A grieving widow possibly suffering from cognitive decline, or her concerned daughter and son-in-law? The strategy is now explicit. They'll claim I'm mentally incompetent if necessary to maintain control of my assets. I've anticipated this, but hearing it stated so baldly still chills me. Documentation can be examined for authenticity. Greg. Signatures can be verified and cognitive ability can be professionally assessed. I move toward the door with deliberate confidence. I may be grieving, but I'm far from decline. Something you're about to learn the hard way. As I leave, I hear him already on the phone to Caroline, his voice urgent and agitated. I walk calmly to Martha's house where she waits anxiously on her porch. You're pale as a sheet, she observes, ushering me inside. What happened? Greg just threatened to challenge my mental competence if I fight the mortgage. I tell her, accepting the glass of water she offers. They're prepared to claim I'm cognitively impaired to maintain control of my assets. Martha's outrage is immediate and validating. That's despicable. You're one of the sharpest minds in Cedar Grove. Richard always said you could calculate grocery totals faster than a cashier scanner. The mention of this small marital joke, Richard's genuine amazement at my mental math abilities, brings unexpected comfort. He would never have doubted my competence, never would have allowed anyone to question my mental acuity. I need to document this conversation while it's fresh, I say, already reaching for my notebook. Harriet emphasized contemporaneous notes for any interactions. As I record the details of my confrontation with Greg, including his specific threats and demeanor, I feel a strange calm settling over me. The worst has happened. My daughter and son-in-law have not only stolen from me, but are now prepared to attack my mental competence to cover their theft. With this line crossed, any lingering ambivalence about my course of action evaporates. They have shown exactly who they are and what they're willing to do. Now I will show them exactly who I am. Not just the patient mother and teacher they've taken for granted, but the strategic thinker who once navigated the complexities of corporate finance and who now will use every resource at her disposal to reclaim what is rightfully hers. When Martha offers her guest room until this situation resolves, I accept. Gratefully. The proximity to my house will allow me to monitor their activities while having the security of trusted friend nearby. Tomorrow, the photographer will document my home for the listing, making official my intent to sell the property that Caroline and Greg assumed they could simply appropriate. You know they'll escalate when they see the listing go live, Martha warns as she helps me settle into her guest room. I'm counting on it, I reply, a strategy already forming in my mind. Sometimes you need to provoke a reaction to expose what's really happening. In the quiet of Martha's guest room, I send a brief email to Harriet documenting Greg's threats regarding my mental competence, copying Douglas Freeman and Marion at the bank, creating a contemporaneous record with multiple professional witnesses strengthens my position against any future claims they might make. Then I do something I've resisted until now. I write a direct message to Caroline. I know about the fraudulent mortgage. Know about the attempt with First Fidelity. I know about Greg's renovation plans for my house. And now I know. You're prepared to question my mental competence to maintain control of assets that aren't yours. This stops now. House will be listed for sale on Monday. Any further attempts to access my property or finances will result in immediate legal action, including criminal charges. This is not a negotiation. I press send without hesitation, then silence my phone as it immediately begins to ring. There will be time for conversations later, but tonight I need rest and clarity. Tomorrow begins the next phase of reclaiming my life, a phase Caroline and Greg are entirely unprepared for. Saturday morning brings a perfect New England autumn day. Crisp air, golden sunlight, leaves beginning to turn their brilliant reds and oranges. Under different circumstances, it would be the ideal day for the apple-picking tradition Richard and I maintained for 4 decades. Instead, I sit at Martha's kitchen table reviewing 17 text messages and 9 voicemails from Caroline, each progressively more hostile than the last. The final voicemail, left at 2:18 a.m., contains a threat that confirms my decision to involve legal authorities. Mom, if you go through with listing the house, we'll have no choice but to petition for guardianship. We have documentation from Dad's doctor about your emotional state during his illness. No one would question a daughter's concern for her recently widowed mother making irrational financial decisions. Think very carefully about your next move. Martha, overhearing the message as I play it on speaker, nearly drops her coffee mug. They would go that far. Try to get legal control over you based on your grief. Apparently so, I reply, forwarding the voicemail to Harriet with a brief explanatory note. Invested too much in this scheme to back down now. Jenny Sullivan's photographer arrives at 10 a.m. sharp. Young woman with an artist's eye who captures my home's best features while diplomatically working around the renovation materials Greg's team left scattered throughout the kitchen. I accompany her through each room, experiencing a complex mixture of grief and determination as I prepare to sell the home where Richard and I raised our family, hosted countless holiday gatherings, and plan to grow old together. The listing will go live Monday morning as promised. Jenny confirms as the photographer packs up her equipment. Based on current market conditions, I expect we'll have showings requested by afternoon. Are you prepared for that? As prepared as I can be, I tell her, knowing that each showing brings me closer to a definitive break with a home that holds 40 years of memories. Memories now tainted by Caroline's betrayal. I've just returned to Martha's when Harriet calls with urgent news. Eleanor, Caroline, and Greg have just filed an emergency petition for temporary guardianship claiming you're making financially destructive decisions due to grief-induced cognitive impairment. There's a hearing scheduled for Wednesday morning. Though I've anticipated this move, the reality of my own daughter legally attempting to declare me incompetent still lands like a physical blow. That was fast, I manage, sinking into Martha's armchair. They're working with Stanley Preston, Harriet explains, naming a lawyer known for aggressive elder law tactics. But they've made critical mistakes in their haste. The petition contains demonstrably false claims about your financial history and current actions, such as they claim you've been giving away substantial sums to strangers and refusing necessary medical care. Both assertions we can easily disprove. More importantly, they failed to include an appropriate medical assessment instead. Relying on notes from Richard's doctor about your emotional distress during his illness. Grief isn't cognitive impairment, I point out precisely. I've already arranged for you to undergo a comprehensive cognitive assessment on Monday with Dr. Abigail Warner, a geriatric psychiatrist who frequently testifies in capacity cases. Her evaluation will carry significant weight with the court. After ending the call, I sit quietly processing this escalation. Caroline isn't just attempting to take my home. She's now trying to legally strip me of my autonomy to gain control over every aspect of my life under the guise of protection. The depth of this betrayal exceeds even my worst expectations. Martha, sensing my distress, sits beside me. What can I do to help? Witness statements, I decide. Strategic thinking overriding emotional response. The court will want evidence of my cognitive functioning from people who interact with me regularly. Would you be willing to provide a statement about our recent interactions? Of course, she agrees immediately. And I'll ask Pastor Williams and the library board members too. They've all seen you handling complex decisions during the church renovation committee meetings. By Sunday evening, we've collected 6 witness statements testifying to my mental acuity, organization skills, and rational decision-making in various contexts. Combined with Dr. Warner's upcoming assessment and documentation from Marion at the bank regarding my methodical financial management, we're building a compelling case against Caroline's guardianship petition. Monday brings 2 significant developments. First, Dr. Warner's cognitive assessment, which I complete with perfect scores across all measures of executive function, memory, judgment, and financial capacity. Mrs. Bishop, she Tells me afterward, I conduct dozens of these assessments monthly. Your cognitive function is not merely adequate for independent living. It's exceptional for any age. My report will state this unequivocally. The second development occurs at 2 p.m. when I meet with Diane Kramer from First Fidelity Mortgage. In her office, she presents me with a shocking discovery. This application was submitted online 3 weeks ago, she explains, showing me documents bearing what appears to be my signature. It requested a $300,000 home equity line of credit on your property, in addition to the existing mortgage with Coastal Mortgage. A second attempt to extract money from my home, I observe, examining the forged signature with dismay. But here's what's notable, Diane continues, turning to her computer. We record all online application sessions. It's disclosed in the terms of service that most people don't read. This screen recording shows the exact session when your application was created. She plays the video, a screen capture showing each field being completed with my personal information. The timestamp shows 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday 3 weeks ago while I was spending the night at the hospital with Richard. But most damning of all is a brief moment when the camera activates. During the identity verification portion, capturing a clear image of Caroline sitting at what I recognize as Greg's home office desk, methodically filling out the fraudulent application in my name. This is irrefutable evidence, Diane states, handing me a flash drive containing the recording. Our fraud department has already filed a report with the Financial Crimes Division of the State Police. I wanted you to have a copy for your own legal proceedings. I clutched the flash drive, recognizing its value beyond mere evidence. This is the smoking gun that transforms the narrative from my word against theirs to documented, incontrovertible fraud. By Monday afternoon, as predicted, Jenny reports 5 showing requests within hours of my house listing going live. The interest validates our pricing strategy and creates immediate pressure on Caroline and Greg, who will recognize that a quick sale could void their fraudulent claims before they can stop it. When I return to Martha's house, a familiar car sits in the driveway, Caroline's red SUV. My daughter waits on the porch, her expression a mixture of anger and calculation that makes her nearly unrecognizable to me. We need to talk, she says as I approach, not bothering with greetings. This has gone far enough. I pause at the bottom of the steps, maintaining physical distance. That feels suddenly necessary. Agree. Your attempts to fraudulently mortgage my home, sell it without my consent, and now declare me incompetent have indeed gone far enough. Her eyes narrow at my calm defiance. You don't understand what you're doing. The guardianship petition is for your own protection. You're making irrational decisions based on grief. Protecting my assets from theft is perhaps the most rational decision I've made recently. Counter. And as for the guardianship petition, I look forward to presenting evidence of your fraud to the judge on Wednesday. Caroline's composure slips. Genuine alarm crossing her features. What evidence? The screen recording from First Fidelity showing you completing a fraudulent loan application in my name for starters. I watch this land. confirming she had no idea such evidence existed. The application you submitted while I was at the hospital with your dying father. She recovers quickly. Years of practice at emotional manipulation evident in her swift pivot. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. Dad's death has affected you more than you realize. Greg and I are trying to secure the family's financial future, including yours. Why can't you see that we're trying to help you? The audacity of this framing, casting their theft as assistance, reignites my determination. Caroline, this conversation is over. We'll see you in court on Wednesday. Any further communication should go through our respective attorneys. As I move to walk past her up the stairs, she grabs my arm, a gesture so unexpected and inappropriate that we both freeze in momentary shock. You can't do this. Hisses, fingers digging into my sleeve. Do you have any idea what this could do to Greg's business, to our reputation in Cedar Grove, to the kids' college funds? I gently but firmly remove her hand. Should have considered those consequences before committing fraud. Now, please leave before I call the police to report this harassment. Something shifts in her expression, the calculation giving way to genuine anger. This isn't over. You have no idea what you're up against. As she storms to her car and drives away, Martha emerges from inside the house where she's been wisely monitoring our interaction. Are you all right? She asks, concern evident in her voice. I'm fine, I assure her, though my racing heart suggests otherwise. But I think we need to install security cameras here too. This is escalating in ways I didn't fully anticipate. Evening, I forward the first fidelity evidence to Harriet, along with a detailed account of Caroline's ambush and implied threats. Each document, each recorded interaction strengthens our position for Wednesday's hearing. A hearing that will determine not just control of my assets but the fundamental question of my autonomy as a competent adult. As I prepare for bed in Martha's guest room, I find myself thinking of Richard and what he would make of this situation. The man who taught high school mathematics for 40 years, who approached problems with logical precision, who valued integrity. Above all else, what would he advise now? The answer comes with perfect clarity. Proceed with truth and documentation. Let the evidence speak. And remember that while Caroline may have been our daughter, she has made her choices as an adult and must face adult consequences. With this resolution firm in my mind, I turn out the light, ready for whatever tomorrow brings. Tuesday morning brings an unexpected visit from Detective Sandra Morris of the Cedar Grove Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. She arrives at Martha's house precisely at 9 a.m. Her demeanor professional but sympathetic as she explains the purpose of her visit. Mrs. Bishop, we've received concerning reports from several financial institutions regarding potentially fraudulent activities involving your accounts and property. She begins once we're seated in Martha's living room. I'd like to ask you some questions about these matters if you're comfortable doing so. I'm not only comfortable, Detective Morris, I'm relieved, I tell her, retrieving my organized folder of documentation. I've been gathering evidence of these fraudulent activities for the past week. For the next 2 hours, I provide Detective Morris with a comprehensive account of Caroline and Greg's actions, the unauthorized mortgage, the attempted home equity line of credit, Greg's renovation plans for a house he doesn't own, and now the guardianship petition filed to prevent me from protecting my assets. This is one of the more egregious cases of elder financial exploitation I've seen, Detective Morris comments as she reviews the first fidelity screen recording, showing Caroline completing the fraudulent application. The premeditation is particularly concerning. My daughter and son-in-law appear to believe my age makes me an easy target. I observe the painful truth no less difficult to articulate, despite days of processing this betrayal. Unfortunately, that's a common misconception among financial exploiters, Detective Morris replies. They often underestimate older adults' resilience and resourcefulness. She closes her notebook with a decisive snap. Based on the evidence you've provided and the reports from financial institutions, we have sufficient grounds to open a formal criminal investigation. The words land with a weight I wasn't fully prepared for. Criminal investigation. Despite everything, some part of me has been hoping for resolution that doesn't involve potential criminal charges against my only child. But Caroline's escalating aggression, particularly the guardianship petition and her confrontation yesterday, has eliminated that possibility. What happens next? I ask, my teacher's practicality asserting itself through the emotional turbulence. We'll take formal statements from the financial institutions involved, document the evidence you've provided, and present the case to the district attorney for potential charges. Detective Morris's expression softens slightly. Mrs. Bishop, I understand this is exceptionally difficult given the family relationship. If charges are filed, would you be willing to testify? The question crystallizes the choice before me. To protect myself fully, I must be willing to testify against my own daughter in criminal court. The prospect is heartbreaking. Yet the alternative, allowing Caroline and Greg to continue their exploitation unchecked, is unacceptable. Yes, I say firmly, pushing aside maternal instincts that no longer serve either of us. I will testify if needed. After Detective Morris leaves with copies of my evidence, I call Harriet to update her on this development. Her response is immediately strategic. This strengthens our position for tomorrow's guardianship hearing significantly. She notes, a criminal investigation into the very people seeking guardianship over you creates an obvious conflict of interest. I'll file a supplementary brief this afternoon. By early afternoon, Jenny Sullivan calls with updates that further validate our approach. We've received 11 showing requests for the house so far, including 3 from pre-qualified buyers. I've scheduled them starting Thursday, assuming Wednesday's hearing goes as expected. It will, I assure her. Confidence growing with each piece of evidence, each professional ally who recognizes the legitimacy of my position. My phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Bishop, this is Kevin Shaw again. Greg just sent an email to all former employees threatening legal action if we spread misinformation about green innovations. He's clearly panicking. Thought you should know. This indirect confirmation that our counteroffense offensive is having its intended effect bolsters my resolve. I forward the message to Harriet, another piece in our growing documentation of Caroline and Greg's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control of their fraudulent scheme. Late Tuesday afternoon brings perhaps the most significant development yet. Douglas Freeman calls with news about the fraudulent mortgage. Eleanor, we've made a critical discovery. He begins, excitement evident in his typically measured tone. The notary whose stamp appears on the mortgage documents has filed a report stating her stamp was used without authorization. She has never met you and was actually on vacation in Florida the day the documents were supposedly notarized in Cedar Grove. Another forgery, I conclude, adding this to the mountain of evidence against Caroline and Greg. Not just forgery. Notary fraud is a separate criminal offense, Douglas explains. I forwarded all documentation to Detective Morris and updated Harriet for tomorrow's hearing. By Tuesday evening, as Martha and I prepare a simple dinner, the pieces have aligned with a clarity that transcends my initial shock and grief. What began as a personal betrayal has evolved into a documented pattern of criminal behavior that extends beyond family drama into the realm of serious legal consequences. Are you ready for tomorrow? Martha asks as we clean up after dinner, concern evident in her voice. As ready as I can be, I reply honestly. I never imagined having to defend my competence against my own daughter in court. But here we are. Here we are indeed. Martha agrees, handing me a freshly dried plate to put away. But you're not facing it alone. Half the town is outraged on your behalf since word got out about what they've done. This is news to me. Word got out. How? Martha looks slightly sheepish. Well, Pastor Williams might have mentioned during Sunday's service that we should pray for a community member facing elder exploitation from family members. He didn't name names, but everyone in Cedar Grove can connect those particular dots. I finished torn between embarrassment at my private troubles, becoming public knowledge, and gratitude for the community support. Caroline and Greg showed up at church looking like they'd swallowed lemons. Martha continues with undisguised satisfaction. Left before the coffee hour when 3 different people asked pointed questions about your well-being. The image brings an unexpected smile to my face, the first genuine amusement I felt in days. Public opinion in small towns can be a powerful force, and it appears that force is aligning firmly in my favor. That night, as I prepare for bed, I review the timeline of events Harriet has helped me create for tomorrow's hearing. The chronology is damning. While I sat at Richard's bedside during his final days, Caroline and Greg were actively plotting to exploit my distraction and grief for financial gain. The documented evidence creates an irrefutable narrative of opportunistic predation rather than concerned family members protecting a cognitively impaired elder. My phone buzzes with one final text before I turn in for the night. From Kevin Jiao again. Just heard. Green Innovations lost their office lease. Landlords cited reputational concerns after local bank withdrew financing commitment. Greg was escorted out by security after making threats. The house of cards is collapsing faster than I anticipated. As I set my alarm for 6 a.m., early enough to prepare thoroughly for the 9 a.m. hearing, I feel an unfamiliar sense of vindication. Not pleasure in Caroline and Greg's downfall, but validation that the systems designed to protect vulnerable adults can sometimes work as intended when activated by someone with the knowledge and resources to navigate them effectively. Tomorrow I will face my daughter across a courtroom, defending my mental competence against her attempts to seize control of my life. Will be painful, possibly traumatic, certainly life-altering. But tonight I rest in the certainty that truth documented is a powerful shield against those who would exploit vulnerability. Even when those exploiters share your DNA, in the quiet darkness of Martha's guest room, I whisper to Richard's memory, "I'm doing what needs to be done. I hope you understand." The silence that follows feels somehow like his approval. Cedar Grove's courthouse dates back to 1892. Its imposing granite facade and broad marble steps designed to inspire respect for the law. I've passed it thousands of times during my decades in town, but never entered its doors until today, the day I must defend my competence against my own daughter's attempts to declare me incapable of managing my affairs. Harriet meets me on the courthouse steps at 8:30 a.m. Her confident demeanor and impeccable charcoal suit providing reassurance. Martha walks beside me, having insisted on accompanying me for moral support. Several familiar faces nod greeting as we enter. The town librarian, two former teaching colleagues, Pastor Williams, their presence unexpected but fortifying. Word travels fast in small towns, Harriet observes, noting my surprise at the community turnout. People generally dislike seeing one of their own mistreated, especially someone with your standing in the community. The courtroom is more intimate than television depictions would suggest. A compact space with well-worn wooden benches, walls pan-led in dark oak, and morning sunlight filtering through tall windows. I spot Caroline and Greg, immediately seated at the respondents' table with their attorney, Stanley Preston, a corpulent man whose expensive suit and aggressive reputation precede him. Caroline looks up as we enter, her expression briefly vulnerable before hardening into something unreadable. Greg leans toward Preston, whispering urgently while gesturing toward a document before them. Neither acknowledges my presence directly. Received our supplemental filing with the criminal investigation details this morning. Harriet whispers as we take our seats at the petitioner's table. Based on their body language, they weren't prepared for that development. Helen Watkins enters promptly at 9 a.m. A slender woman in her 60s with silver hair cut in a practical bob and reading glasses perched on her nose. Her reputation for no-nonsense efficiency in family court matters is well known in legal circles. According to Harriet, "Good morning," she begins, reviewing the papers before her. "We're here regarding case number FC 2023-157 in the matter of Ella Lehner Bishop. This is a hearing on a petition for temporary guardianship filed by Caroline Reynolds, the respondent's daughter. I've reviewed the petition and supporting documentation, as well as the respondent's opposition filing. Watkins peers over her glasses, her gaze direct and evaluating as it moves between our table and Caroline's. Before we proceed, I must address the supplemental filing submitted this morning regarding an active criminal investigation into the petitioners for alleged financial exploitation of the respondent. Mr. Preston, were you aware of this development when filing for guardianship? Preston rises, his confident baritone filling the courtroom. Your Honor, we were not aware of any formal investigation at the time of filing. My clients categorically deny any wrongdoing and believe these allegations are manifestations of Mrs. Bishop's confusion and emotional distress following her husband's death. Judge Watkins's expression remains neutral, but her response is pointed. Interesting theory, counselor. Perhaps you could explain why the Cedar Grove Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit and two separate banking institutions have independently identified potential criminal activity. Preston shifts tactics seamlessly. Your Honor, regardless of these unsubstantiated allegations, the core issue remains Mrs. Bishop's current decision-making capacity. Her recent behavior, disappearing for days, attempting to sell her primary residence without secured housing alternatives, making large financial transfers, demonstrates impaired judgment consistent with grief-induced cognitive decline. Harriet rises, her voice calm, but forceful. Your Honor, we have comprehensive evidence refuting both the guardianship petition's claims and Mr. Preston's characterization. Dr. Abigail Warner's cognitive assessment conducted yesterday shows Mrs. Bishop's executive function and decision-making capacity are not merely adequate but exceptional for her age or any age. Additionally, we have documentation proving the concerning behaviors cited in the petition were in fact rational responses to discovering she was the victim of financial exploitation. Judge Watkins nods. I've reviewed Dr. Warner's assessment, which is indeed compelling. Mr. Preston, the petition cites Mrs. Bishop's grief as the primary factor in her alleged incapacity. Can you provide specific evidence of cognitive impairment beyond emotional distress following her husband's death? Preston's momentary hesitation speaks volumes. Your Honor, we have statements from the petitioner describing instances of confusion, memory lapses, and uncharacteristic decision-making. Anecdotal observations from an interested party, Judge Watkins notes, who, according to these police reports, was simultaneously attempting to secure fraudulent loans against Mrs. Bishop's property. That creates at minimum a significant conflict of interest. He turns toward me. Mrs. Bishop, I'd like to hear directly from you about these events. As I stand, I feel Caroline's gaze burning into me from across the courtroom. For a moment, I remember her as a small child, pigtails askew, determined expression as she learned to ride a bike. Her little hand trustingly in mine as we crossed streets. Contrast with the stranger watching me now. The woman who forged documents while I sat beside her dying father creates a pain so acute it momentarily steals my breath, but only momentarily. I straighten my shoulders and address the court with the same clear, measured voice I used for 40 years in my classroom. Your Honor, while I was sitting with my husband during his final days, my daughter and son-in-law executed a complex scheme to mortgage my fully paid home without my knowledge or consent. When I discovered this fraud upon returning home after Richard's death, Caroline told me, and I quote, "He needed it more than you do," referring to her husband's business needs versus my financial security. Continue methodically through the timeline of events, describing each discovery, each piece of evidence, each step I've taken to protect my assets and autonomy. Throughout my testimony, I maintain direct eye contact with Judge Watkins, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of publicly detailing my daughter's betrayal. The actions I've taken, securing my insurance funds, consulting attorneys, listing my house for sale, are not signs of confusion or impairment. They are rational, strategic responses to discovering I had been financially exploited by family members. I trusted implicitly. As I conclude my testimony, the courtroom remains utterly silent. Judge Watkins studies me for a long moment before turning to Caroline. "Ms. Reynolds, would you like to address your mother's testimony?" Caroline rises slowly, her composure visibly strained. "Your Honor, my mother has always been strong-willed and independent. Those qualities made her an excellent teacher and parent. But since my father's diagnosis, she's been different, more paranoid, quick to assume the worst about family members' intentions. The attempt to reframe my protection of my assets as paranoia might have been effective if not for the mountain of documentation proving the legitimacy of my concerns." Judge Watkins's expression suggests she recognizes this disconnect. "Ms. Reynolds, the court has documentation of a mortgage application bearing your mother's forged signature, security footage of you completing a fraudulent loan application in her name, and testimony from a notary stating her credentials were falsified on documents you submitted. How do you reconcile these facts with your characterization of your mother's concerns as paranoid?" Caroline falters, looking to Preston for guidance. He rises again smoothly, intervening. "Your Honor, these allegations, while concerning if proven true, don't negate the legitimate worry about Mrs. Bishop's current judgment and welfare. We believe a neutral third-party evaluation of her living situation and financial management would benefit everyone involved." Judge Watkins removes her glasses, fixing Preston with a direct gaze. "Counselor, what I'm seeing is an attempt to use this court to gain control over assets that your clients have already tried to access through potentially criminal means. That is not the purpose of guardianship provisions." She turns back to the documents before her, reviewing them silently for several moments before delivering her ruling. The petition for temporary guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I'm issuing a financial protection order prohibiting Caroline Reynolds and Gregory Reynolds from accessing any accounts, properties, or assets belonging to Ella Laner Bishop. Relief washes over me. Not celebration, but the quieter satisfaction of being believed, of having my autonomy affirmed by the court. Judge Watkins isn't finished. "Mrs. Bishop, While I'm denying this guardianship petition, I want to ensure you have appropriate support systems in place given your recent widowhood and these family complications. Would you be amenable to a court-appointed elder advocate checking in periodically? I would welcome that, Your Honor, I reply honestly. Additional professional oversight seems prudent given recent events. She nods, satisfied, then turns a stern gaze toward Caroline and Greg. And to the petitioners, be advised that filing guardianship petitions as a means to gain control of assets is an abuse of this court's purpose. Given the active criminal investigation, I am forwarding all documentation from this hearing to the District Attorney's Office for their review. As Judge Watkins concludes the hearing, I exhale slowly, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and sorrow. I've won this battle. Autonomy is secure, my competence officially recognized. But the cost has been the final fracturing of my relationship with my only child. A loss that sits heavily alongside my grief for Richard. Martha squeezes my hand as we rise to leave. You did it, Eleanor. Stood your ground. Yes, I think, as we exit the courtroom, carefully avoiding Caroline's gaze. I stood my ground. The ground beneath us all has irrevocably shifted. And what remains is forever altered by what we've lost. 24 hours following the hearing pass in a blur of activity. Jenny Sullivan reports 5 scheduled showings of my house for Thursday and Friday, with interest exceeding her expectations. Harriet files the judge's financial protection order with all relevant financial institutions, creating an additional layer of security around my assets. Douglas Freeman expedites paperwork to formally challenge the fraudulent mortgage, strengthened by the notary's affidavit confirming her stamp was used without authorization. By Thursday morning, a strange calm has settled over me. The quiet after a storm when damage is assessed and rebuilding begins. I return to my house for the first time since confronting Greg, needing to prepare it for the upcoming showings. Martha insists on accompanying me, concerned about potential confrontations if Caroline or Greg appear. But the house stands empty, sunlight streaming through windows that need washing. Milk piled neatly on the entry table, courtesy of Martha's daily collection. The renovation materials have disappeared from the kitchen, leaving only faint marks on the countertops where samples once sat. The silence holds a quality I can't quite name. Not peace exactly, but absence, as if the house itself is holding its breath, waiting to learn its fate. Feels different, I observe moving through rooms that contain 40 years of my life, like it's already not mine anymore. Houses know things, Martha replies with the matter-of-fact wisdom of someone who has lived in the same home for 6 decades. They feel when change is coming. We spend the morning preparing for the showings, dusting, vacuuming, arranging fresh flowers in strategic locations. I place family photographs in drawers, unable to bear the sight of Caroline's smiling face, watching me as I systematically dismantle the life we shared in this space. The task is both practical and symbolic, clearing physical reminders of the past to make room for an uncertain future. By early afternoon, we've transformed the house into the impersonal showcase needed for successful viewings. As we finish, my phone rings with a number I don't recognize. Mrs. Bishop, this is Amanda Tilley from the district attorney's office. Do you have a few minutes to discuss the investigation into Caroline and Gregory Reynolds? I step onto the back porch for privacy, steeling myself for whatever comes next. Yes, I'm available. What can I tell you? We've reviewed the evidence provided by Detective Morris and the documentation from yesterday's court hearing. Based on our assessment, we're preparing to file criminal charges for mortgage fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation of an elder, and forgery against both Caroline and Gregory Reynolds. Though I've known this was a possibility, even a probability, given the substantial evidence, hearing it stated so officially sends a chill through me. My daughter facing criminal charges, my grandson's parents potentially incarcerated. What happens next? Ask, my voice steadier than I feel. Will be presenting the case to the grand jury next week for indictment. If they return true bills, we'll issue arrest warrants. Given the nature of the charges and the defendants' community ties, they'll likely be permitted to surrender themselves rather than being arrested at home or work. The clinical description of a process that will shatter what remains of my family feels surreal. And if they're convicted, these charges typically carry sentences of 2 to 5 years, though first-time offenders often receive probation with restitution requirements. Given the amount involved and the exploitation aspect, however, some jail time is possible. After ending the call, I sit alone on the porch. Steps, the same steps where Richard and I watched countless sunsets, where Caroline learned to jump rope, where neighborhood children gathered for popsicles on summer afternoons. The weight of what's happening settles over me. My actions, while necessary for self-protection, have set in motion consequences that will affect not just Caroline and Greg, but their children, my grandchildren as well. Martha finds me there, still processing bad news. She asks, settling beside me. Criminal charges are being filed next week, I tell her. Mortgage fraud, identity theft, elder exploitation, forgery. Nods, unsurprised. They made their choices, Eleanor repeatedly. This isn't your doing, isn't it though? I could choose not to cooperate with the prosecution. I could decline to testify. Martha considers this, her expression thoughtful. You could. And what message would that send? That exploitation has no consequences. That betraying family trust is acceptable if you're eventually caught. That laws protecting vulnerable adults don't matter if the perpetrator is related to the victim. Her questions cut through my momentary doubt. But it's just difficult to reconcile the daughter I thought I raised with someone capable of these actions. People surprise us, Martha says simply. Sometimes wonderfully, sometimes terribly. The question is how we respond to those surprises. Our conversation is interrupted by Jenny's arrival for the first showing. A couple in their 30s, with a toddler and another child on the way, looking for a family home with history and character. I watch from Martha's driveway as they tour my house, the young woman's hand resting on her pregnant belly as she gazes up at the Magnolia tree Richard planted the year we moved in. They love it, Jenny reports afterward. Particularly the established garden and the reading nook under the stairs. They're pre-approved and considering making an offer after their second viewing tomorrow. The news should bring satisfaction, evidence that my counter-strategy is working, but instead leaves me feeling hollow. Another family will make memories in these rooms. Will celebrate holidays under this roof. Will plant their own trees and watch them grow to maturity. Life continuing its relentless forward movement while I navigate the wreckage of what once was. Friday brings 3 more showings and confirmation from Harriet that the fraudulent mortgage is being formally challenged through legal channels, with the bank initiating its own internal fraud investigation. By evening, Jenny calls with news that the young couple wishes to make an offer, $455,000, slightly below asking, but with minimal contingencies, and a flexible closing timeline. It's a solid offer from qualified buyers who genuinely love the house, Jenny advises. In this market, with the known complications regarding the mortgage situation, I'd recommend serious consideration. I agree to review the formal offer when it arrives Saturday morning. As I end the call, an email notification appears on my phone. From Caroline. The first direct communication since the court hearing. My finger hovers over the screen. Momentary hesitation before opening it. Mom, my attorney has advised me not to contact you given the pending criminal investigation, but I needed to say this directly. I never intended for things to escalate to this point. What began as a temporary solution to Greg's business funding needs spiraled beyond what either of us anticipated. I've been informed that you're selling the house and have received an offer. Well, I still believe our original plan would have benefited everyone in the long run. I recognize that you see it differently. I won't contest the sale or create further complications. The district attorney's office has contacted us regarding potential criminal charges. I don't know what will happen next, but I'm trying to shield the children from as much of this as possible. They're already asking why they haven't seen you, and I don't know what to tell them. Caroline, the email's careful wording. No direct admission of wrongdoing, no explicit apology. Emphasis on shielding the children rather than acknowledging harm done reflects the Caroline I now know rather than the daughter I thought I had. Even facing criminal charges, she cannot bring herself to take full responsibility for her actions or express genuine remorse. Yet beneath my disappointment, a flicker of maternal concern persists. The children, my grandchildren, are innocent casualties in this conflict. Their lives will be irrevocably altered by their parents' choices and the consequences now unfolding. I draft and delete 3 responses before settling on one that maintains necessary boundaries while acknowledging my continued connection to my grandchildren. Caroline, I am proceeding with the sale of the house and expect to accept an offer this weekend. The legal processes regarding the fraudulent mortgage and other matters will continue as determined by the relevant authorities regarding the children. They have done nothing wrong and should not suffer additional loss. If you are comfortable with supervised visits arranged through a neutral third party, I would welcome the opportunity to maintain my relationship with them. During this difficult time, Ella Laner, as I press send, I recognize that this communication represents a new phase in our fractured relationship. Not reconciliation, but a carefully negotiated dance that prioritizes the children's well-being while maintaining the boundaries necessary for my protection. The house grows quiet as evening settles. Martha has gone to her book club, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the gentle tick of the grandfather clock Richard restored the year before his diagnosis. Tomorrow I will likely accept an offer on the house where we built our life together. Next week my daughter may face criminal indictment. The future I once envisioned, peaceful widowhood in my family home, surrounded by children and grandchildren, has vanished, replaced by something I'm still struggling to define. Yet beneath the grief and uncertainty, a foundation of quiet strength has emerged. A capacity to protect myself, to navigate complex systems, to rebuild from betrayal. These two are legacy from Richard and our life together, though I never expected to need them in quite this way. 3 months after that fateful day when I discovered the fraudulent mortgage, I stand in the sunlit living room of my new condominium surrounded by carefully selected belongings from my former home. The space is smaller but thoughtfully designed. 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen and living area, a small balcony overlooking the community garden. Most importantly, it's fully paid for with a portion of Richard's insurance money secured against any future attempts at exploitation. The sale of the house closed 2 weeks ago, $455,000 from the young couple, expecting their second child. They'd been gracious about the delayed closing while the fraudulent mortgage situation was resolved. Patience rewarded with a solid family home at a fair price. Douglas Freeman had worked miracles, collaborating with bank fraud investigators to expedite the mortgage invalidation process once the notary fraud evidence came to light. The sale proceeds now sit in a carefully structured trust, an additional layer of protection recommended by Harriet. A knock at the door interrupts my contemplation. Martha enters carrying a flowering plant from my balcony, her latest contribution to what she calls my fresh start garden. The moving crew did a nice job, she observes, surveying the thoughtfully arranged furniture. It looks like you've been here for years already. Teachers are good organizers, I reply with a small smile. And I've had plenty of time to plan the layout. Indeed, the 3 months between accepting the offer on my house and today's final move had provided ample opportunity to reimagine my living space. I donated much of the larger furniture that wouldn't fit in the condominium, kept pieces with special meaning, and purchased several new items that reflected this next chapter. Practical, yet beautiful pieces chosen solely for my own pleasure rather than family functionality. Have you heard anything? Martha asks, the deliberate vagueness acknowledging the subject we've danced around all morning. The plea hearing is scheduled for Monday. Confirm. Harriet says the prosecutor has offered a deal. 2 years probation, full restitution, and community service in exchange for guilty plea to reduce charges. The criminal case against Caroline and Greg had proceeded with mechanical inevitability after the grand jury indictment. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of significant prison time, they had apparently opted to accept the prosecutor's offer rather than risk trial. How do you feel about that? Martha asks carefully, helping me arrange books on the new built-in shelves. It's a question I've asked myself repeatedly as the case progressed. Relieved, I answer. Honestly, prison wouldn't undo what happened, and the children have already experienced enough disruption. Children, my grandchildren, remain the most complicated aspect of this situation. Following my email to Caroline, we had established a fragile arrangement for supervised visits at the community center, neutral territory, where a social worker could monitor our interactions. The children, confused by the sudden family fracture, but resilient in their youth, had gradually adjusted to this new normal. They now understood that Grandma has a new home, and Mom and Dad have some grown-up problems to solve. Simplified explanations that preserve their sense of security while acknowledging the changed circumstances. Speaking of the children, I say, checking my watch. Should start preparing for tomorrow's visit. Emma's bringing them at 11 o'clock. Emma Harrison, the family therapist who had been instrumental in establishing the visitation arrangement, had gradually transitioned from supervisor to facilitator as the emotional temperature between Caroline and me cooled from open hostility to tense civility. Tomorrow would mark the first visit to my new home, a significant step in normalizing our reconfigured relationship. I'll help you set up that craft project you mentioned, Martha offers, following me to the second bedroom that serves as both guest room and hobby space. As we organize materials for the bird feeder construction I've planned, an activity that balances creative expression with structure, according to Emma's recommendations, my phone rings with Harriet's number. Ella Lehner, I just received word from the prosecutor's office. She begins without preamble. Caroline and Gregory have accepted the plea deal. They'll formally enter guilty on Monday to charges of mortgage fraud and elder financial exploitation. Identity theft and forgery charges will be dropped as part of the agreement. Though I've been expecting this news, hearing it confirmed sends a complex wave of emotions through me. Relief that the legal process is concluding, sadness at the formal acknowledgement of my daughter's crimes, uncertainty about what comes next. The terms include full restitution of the mortgage amount plus your legal expenses. Harriet continues. They'll be required to complete financial ethics training and perform 200 hours of community service each. Most significantly for you, the agreement includes a permanent financial protection order preventing them from involvement with your assets in any capacity. Thank you for letting me know, I reply, my teacher's composure masking the emotional tumult beneath. Will I need to be present for the plea hearing? Well, your victim impact statement has already been submitted to the court. You're welcome to attend, but it's not required. After ending the call, I share the update with Martha, who nods with grim satisfaction. Justice served, though not nearly what they deserved. It's enough, I say quietly. Consequences have been established. Boundaries enforced. restitution ordered. Anything more would only satisfy vengeance, not justice. Martha studies me with the insight of decadesal-long friendship. You've changed through all this, Eleanor. Not hardened exactly, but fortified. Her observation resonates with my own sense of internal transformation. The woman I was before, discovering Caroline's betrayal, the accommodating mother, the widow defined primarily by loss, the retiree gradually diminishing her expectations of life, has been replaced by someone more resolute, more self-protective, yet paradoxically more open to new possibilities. Evidence of this evolution surrounds us in my new home. The watercolor supplies in the corner, materials for the painting class. I've joined travel brochures for the New England coast tour I've booked for autumn, business cards for the financial literacy workshop for seniors I've begun facilitating at the community center, translating my painful experience into protection for others. Life rarely turns out as we expect. I reflect, arranging colorful craft supplies on the table. Richard and I thought we'd grow old together in that house, surrounded by family for holiday gatherings and Sunday dinners. Instead, I'm reinventing myself at 68 in a condominium I never expected to own and doing it with remarkable grace, Martha adds. Richard would be proud of how you've handled all this. The mention of my late husband brings both pain and comfort. In the darkest moments of the past 3 months, I've often found myself wondering what Richard would advise, how he would respond to our daughter's betrayal. The answers have never come as direct guidance, but rather as remembered values. His unwavering integrity, his belief in consequences proportional to actions, his capacity for forgiveness that never abandoned appropriate boundaries. Sunday morning brings sunshine and mild temperatures, perfect weather for the grandchildren's visit. They arrive precisely at 11 o'clock, excited to explore Grandma's new castle, as they've dubbed it, based on my description of the condominium building's architectural details. Emma Harrison accompanies them, her professional demeanor softened by genuine warmth. Carolyn asked me to give you this, she says quietly, handing me an envelope as the children explore the balcony garden. Inside is a handwritten note, the first personal communication from my daughter, not filtered through attorneys or mediated by third parties since the court hearing. Mom, as we prepare to accept legal responsibility for our actions tomorrow, I wanted to write to you directly. The words, "I'm sorry," seem inadequate for what we did, but they are nonetheless true. We betrayed your trust during your most vulnerable time, prioritizing our financial interests over your security and autonomy. Don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation, but I do want you to know that I recognize the harm we caused, not just legally but to our family bonds and to the values you and Dad worked so hard to instill in me. The children treasure their time with you. Whatever happens between us, I hope that relationship can continue to grow. Caroline, I read the note twice, searching for manipulation or hidden agenda, but finding only what appears to be genuine, if belated, acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Not full accountability, perhaps some passive language, some distancing, but more than I've received thus far. Is everything all right? Emma asks, noting my extended silence. Yes, I reply carefully, folding the note and returning it to its envelope. Just unexpected communication. The children call from the balcony, eager to show me the sparrow that has landed on the railing, and I tuck the envelope into my pocket for later consideration. Today is for bird feeders and cookie baking and stories read in the reading nook I've created in the guest room. Tomorrow will bring the formal conclusion of legal proceedings. And with it, decisions about what kind of relationship, if any, might be possible with Caroline going forward. But today, in this moment, I am simply a grandmother sharing a sunny Sunday with her grandchildren in a home that is truly securely my own. After months of crisis and conflict, this simple pleasure feels like the most profound reclamation of all. The ability to be present in joy, undistracted by fear or uncertainty about my future. As I joined the children on the balcony, responding to their excitement over the visiting bird, I silently acknowledge how far I've come from that devastating moment when Caroline coldly informed me that her husband needed more than you do. And I walked away with nothing but my purse and my dignity. I have reclaimed not just my financial security but my autonomy, my confidence, and my capacity to rebuild after betrayal. The journey has been painful beyond measure. But standing here in my new home, surrounded by evidence of my resilience, I recognize that what Caroline and Greg never understood, what exploiters of all kinds fail to comprehend, is that age doesn't diminish a person's capacity for self-protection when equipped with knowledge, support, and the determination to fight for what is rightfully theirs. Look, Grandma, my grandson exclaims, pointing to a second bird joining the first. They're building something together. I smile at the simple observation that somehow captures my current reality. Yes, they are, I agree, watching the birds gather materials for a nest. Sometimes starting fresh is exactly what's needed. The story continues in the next chapter in the next linked video. But first, I need you to subscribe to join the family as we are looking forward to hit our first 10,000 subscribers target, and feel free to share your story in the comments. You matter, your voice does too.